The noise in the room was a physical thing, a wall of manufactured laughter, clinking Riedel crystal, and the low hum of people who thought their net worth made their opinion smarter. I stood near the champagne tower, not drinking. I never drink when I'm working. And tonight, unfortunately, I was working. I was watching my wife, Valerie Whitmore, hold court in the center of the room. She was in her element, wearing a dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. Julian Voss was glued to her side. He wasn't just her chief of staff. He was her prop, her shield, her echo chamber. Adrian. Valerie's voice cut through the din as she approached, dragging Julian along by the elbow. Her smile was flawless, the kind she reserved for magazine covers and hostile takeovers. There you are. I want you to meet everyone properly. I nodded, my face a blank slate. I'd learned long ago that in these circles, a neutral expression is the most intimidating one. She turned to the small crowd that had gathered, LPs from Boston, a couple of managing directors from Goldman, a tech reporter from the Journal. Everyone, she announced, her voice carrying that practice, melodic authority. This is Julian Voss, my husband. The word hit the air between us like a dropped glass, except it didn't shatter. It just sat there, heavy and obscene, a beat of silence. Then, the crowd reacted. A chorus of congratulations and wonderful to finally meet you. Julian, hands reached out to shake his. No one looked at me, not one of them. I was the founder of Aspect Capital, the man who wired $500 million into Whitmore Biotech Series B. I was the reason this party was happening, and in that moment, I was less than furniture. I felt a pen scratch against paper. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Rebecca Cho, the Bloomberg reporter, leaning against a marble pillar. She wasn't even trying to be subtle. She was writing in her Moleskine. I didn't need to see the words to know what she was jotting down. Whitmore introduces Cos Julian Voss's husband, Adrian Pierce, standing 5 feet away. Zero reaction. Story developing. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise an eyebrow. I just watched Julian puff up his chest like a pigeon on a midtown ledge. He looked at me, a flicker of something, triumph, nervousness in his eyes. Valerie leaned in, her perfume suffocating. Smile, darling, she whispered, the endearment sounding like a command. It's just business. Business. Right. Our marriage had always been a merger convenience. She brought the vision and the brand. I brought the capital and the quantitative models that made her projections look like prophecy. But this was a hostile buyout of my identity. I set my untouched glass of Krug on a passing server's tray. Excuse me, I said, my voice even, devoid of inflection. I need some air. I walked toward the terrace. Behind me, the noise resumed. Louder now. I could hear Julian's voice, already telling some anecdote about our strategy for the Asian markets. The cool night air of the Soho rooftop was a relief. I pulled out my phone. The screen lit up my face, reflecting my calm expression back at me. I opened the Aegis interface. It wasn't just an app. It was a central nervous system of my fund. I scrolled past the real-time PL of my long positions until I found the section labeled exposure. Private equity. Under it, Whitmore Biotech. Current valuation, $2. $1 billion. My stake, 23%. $500 million. I heard the door swing open behind me. Footsteps. Julian's cologne arrived before he did. Dramatic exit. Adrian, he said, leaning against the railing beside me. He was shorter than me by 2 inches, but he carried himself like he'd grown 3 feet taller in the last 10 minutes. Relax. It's just optics. You're still the guy wiring the checks. I'm just the guy getting the press. Valerie knows where the money comes from. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on the lines of code scrolling down my screen. Aegis was already running a diagnostic, stress testing Whitmore's liquidity based on current market volatility. You know, Julian continued, mistaking my silence for weakness. She was right. You're too quiet, too invisible. A CEO needs a partner who can be seen, someone who complements the brand. I finally turned my head. In the blue light of the phone, my eyes looked like cold steel. "You're not her husband," I said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Julian laughed. A thin, reedy sound. "Tonight, I am. Tomorrow? Who knows? But tonight, Adrian, I'm the one in the photos. I'm the one she chose to stand next to." I looked back at my phone. Aegis had finished its first pass. The numbers were clear. Whitmore Biotech was over-leveraged, relying on a series of rolling bridge loans that my firm's continued investment was implicitly backstopping. Their runway wasn't built on revenue. It was built on the assumption that I wouldn't pull the plug. "Chosen," I repeated softly. I tapped a specific folder within the app, Automated Divestment Protocols. Julian missed the significance entirely. He thought he'd won around. "Look, don't do anything stupid. You walk. The stock dips. Your own fund takes a hit." Valerie calculated that. I calculated it. We're all still in the green. Just accept your role. I slid my thumb across the screen, authorizing a secure connection to my trading desk at Aspect Capital's Midtown office. "I don't have a role," I said quietly. "I have a majority stake." I put the phone to my ear. It rang once. "Adrian Pierce," I said when the line picked up. My CFO, David Chun, was on the other end. I could hear the faint click-clack of a keyboard in the background. He was pulling an all-nighter, as usual. "Adrian, I'm seeing some unusual activity in the dark pools. Something wrong." "David, initiate full divestment from Whitmore Biotech. All tranches, Series B preferred, common shares, warrants, the whole stack. Execute via dark pools and OTC desks. I want zero market impact on the way out." Silence on the line. David was sharp. He didn't ask, why, unless it involved SEC violations. He asked the only question that mattered. "That's $500 million. Adrian, are you sure? The lockup period technically ended last week, but the optics..." "I'm sure." I cut him off. My voice was flat. "Final. Execute the algorithm. Use the Phoenix protocol. Liquidate and reallocate into the quantum computing plays we looked at last month, the ones out of MIT. Julian was staring at me now, the smugness finally starting to crack. He could hear David's voice through the receiver. "Adrian." David's voice again. Cautious. "Valerie is going to lose her mind. The board works for the equity." I said, watching a city bus crawl down Broadway like a glowing insect. And I just withdrew mine. "Process it. David. Now." I hung up. I turned to Julian. He was pale under the city lights. "What the fuck did you just do?" he whispered, his earlier bravado evaporating. I pulled my investment. I said, $500 million. It's not a loan. Julian, it's not a gift. It's capital. And capital goes where it's respected. Or, in this case, where it isn't actively insulted." He fumbled for his own phone. Valerie. He's doing something." I walked past him, back toward the ballroom. The music was louder now. A string quartet playing something by Mozart. I paused at the entrance. Valerie was still the center of attention, laughing at something a VC from Andreessen was saying. She caught my eye. Her smile faltered for a millisecond when she saw my expression, or lack thereof. I gave her a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a professional courtesy, a closing bell. Then I turned and walked toward the private elevator. I could already hear the vibration of Julian's panicked voice behind me. "Valerie, pick up. He's liquidating. He's actually liquidating everything." As the elevator doors closed, I looked at my reflection in the polished brass. I didn't feel anger. Anger is a high beta emotion. It's volatile and expensive. I felt clarity. Pure, uncut clarity. I pulled out my phone again. A notification from Aegis popped up. Status. Divestment sequence initiated. Projected completion. 47 minutes. Reallocation target. Q Compute Incorporated. Series A. I tapped a reply to David. "David, once the Whitmore position is zeroed out, send the formal notice to their general counsel. CC their lead lender. First National. Include a copy of the Material Adverse Change Clause in our subscription agreement. Highlight the part about public misrepresentation of stakeholder relationships impacting collateral value. I hit send. The elevator descended, smoothing out the chaos of the party above into a distant, irrelevant hum. She introduced him as her husband to the world. I just introduced her to the reality of a world without my money. The doors opened to the private garage. My driver, Marco, was waiting by the Bentley. Home. Mr. Pierce. Office, I said, sliding into the back seat. I opened my laptop. Aegis was already populating a new dashboard, tracking the ripple effects of the divestment. I have some code to finish. As Marco pulled into traffic, I looked out at the glowing skyline of Manhattan. Somewhere uptown, Valerie's phone was starting to blow up. Lenders were checking covenants. Board members were demanding explanations. And Julian? Julian was realizing that being introduced as a husband meant nothing when the prenup was written in algorithms and the dowry was already gone. I typed a single line of code into the Aegis core. It was a simple logic gate. Really, if public underscore reputation equals fabricated and liquidity underscore backing equals withdrawn, then company underscore valuation equals null. I hit enter. The system accepted it without complaint. Math didn't care about feelings. Code didn't care about parties. And I didn't care about husbands, fake or otherwise. I had a $500 million reason to walk. And I just started running. The office was silent, except for the white noise of the server racks in the adjacent data room. No R on the walls. No distractions. Just monitors and the hum of capital moving at light speed. I was still in my tuxedo shirt, sleeves rolled up. When David Chin walked in at 6:14 a.m., he didn't bother with a greeting. "We've got a problem," David said, setting a tablet on my desk. "Whitmore stock is getting smoked in the pre-market, down 14%. But that's not the issue. The issue is Valerie just called the emergency credit line with First National. They're refusing to roll over the bridge loan." I didn't look up from my code. I was fine-tuning the reallocation parameters for the MIT quantum play. They're not refusing. I corrected. They're following the covenant. Our divestment triggered the Material Adverse Change Clause. No aspect capital backing. No liquidity. Simple as that. It's not simple for her, David said, though his tone lacked sympathy. She's burning cash to keep the lights on. She's threatening to sue for breach of fiduciary duty. I finally looked at him. Breach? David, pull up the subscription agreement. Paragraph 4, subsection B. Investor reserves the right to withdraw capital in the event of material misrepresentation by the company regarding the status of key personnel or stakeholders. Calling another man her husband in front of LPs is a misrepresentation of stakeholder stability. I'm not breaching a duty. I'm enforcing a contract. David swiped through the document on his tablet. Legally, you're clean, but PR-wise, she's spinning it. CNBC is running a crawl. Whitmore Biotech plunges amidst mystery investor exodus. They're hinting it's you, but they're framing it as a marital spat, tanking a billion-dollar company. You look unstable. I lean back. Let them. The market doesn't care about my marriage. It cares about risk. I just repriced their risk from low volatility to junk in 4 hours. That's not a spat. David, that's a correction. My phone buzzed. A blocked number. I answered it. Valerie's voice came through, tight and low, stripped of its earlier performative warmth. "Adrian, what the actual fuck?" "Valerie, it's 6:17 a.m. I assume you're calling about the credit facility." "Cut the shit. You pulled $500 million out of the company overnight. Do you have any idea what you've done? We have payroll on Friday. We have a series C close next month. You just vaporized our runway." I put her on speaker. David needed to hear this. "Your runway was built on my capital and your assumptions. Your assumption that I'd tolerate public humiliation was incorrect. Your assumption that the Series C would close without aspect capital, leading it was delusional. You're not short on cash. Valerie, you're short on judgment." "You arrogant son of a bitch," she hissed. "I was managing a brand. Julian is good for optics. He's photogenic. He's charming. He's a liability. I cut her off. He's a chief of staff who can't balance a ledger. He's a prop who doesn't understand the stage he's standing on. You introduce him as your husband to impress a room of people who only respect net worth. All you did was prove you don't understand the difference between a photo op and a balance sheet. She was breathing hard on the other end. I could hear the faint click of a keyboard. Probably Julian, trying to model a damage control scenario he didn't have the data for. Adrian, please, we can fix this. Just reinstate the investment. Quietly, I'll handle the press. I'll tell them it was a misunderstanding. Julian will go back to being just the Cos. We can pretend this never happened. I looked at David. He gave a slow, deliberate shake of his head. Don't negotiate. There's nothing to fix. I said into the phone, because there's nothing left to break. The divestment is complete. The funds have been reallocated. As of 40 minutes ago, Aspect Capital has zero exposure to Whitmore Biotech. You're not my problem anymore. You're going to destroy everything we built? She asked, her voice cracking slightly. It was the first real emotion I'd heard from her in years. Everything we worked for? I built the infrastructure. I said, my voice flat. You built the narrative. Narratives collapse. Valerie, infrastructure endures. You should have learned that by now. I hung up before she could respond. The silence in the office returned. Heavier now. David broke it. She's not going to stop. She'll go to the press. She'll try to get the other LPs to pressure you. Let her, I said. I turned my monitor so he could see the Aegis dashboard. Run a correlation analysis. Cross-reference Whitmore's remaining investors with our LP network. David typed. The results populated in seconds. Holy shit. Exactly. I said, 70% of her remaining investors are limited partners in our other funds. If they want to stay in our good graces, if they want access to the next quantum compute deal or the synthetic biology play in Palo Alto, they'll distance themselves from her. She's not just losing my money. David, she's becoming radioactive. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. A different block number. I answered. Adrian Pierce? A male voice. Chris, authoritative. Julian. I said, bored. If you're calling to yell, save your breath. I bill by the hour, and you're currently costing yourself a fortune in legal fees. You think you're clever, don't you? Julian snarled, pulling the rug out like that. But you're not as smart as you think. I know how these deals work. You've got a lockup. You can't just... I already did. I interrupted. And the lockup expired last Tuesday. Page 12 of the agreement. You should read the fine print before you start accepting introductions as a spouse. It makes the eventual divorce paperwork much easier to process. He sputtered. You're killing the company. You're killing hundreds of jobs. Is this what you wanted? To punish Valerie by destroying her life's work. Her life's work. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. Her life's work is her Instagram feed and her ability to pitch a slide deck. The actual work, the research, the patents, the underlying technology that was funded by me, I didn't destroy it. I just repossessed the assets. And as for jobs, maybe if she'd focused on profitability instead of PR, she wouldn't be facing layoffs. I paused, letting the silence stretch. You want to know what I wanted? Julian? I wanted a partner. What I got was a performance. And I stopped buying tickets. I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the desk. David was watching me, a mixture of awe and caution in his eyes. That was cold, he said. That was math. I replied. I turned back to my screens. Aegis was flagging a new opportunity. A distressed biotech firm in Boston with a promising Alzheimer's drug, but terrible management. Perfect. David, draft a memo to all LPs. Subject, portfolio realignment and risk mitigation. Keep it clinical. State that Aspect Capital has divested from Whitmore Biotech due to irreconcilable discrepancies in corporate governance and public representation. Attach the Mac Clause excerpt. Let them draw their own conclusions. And Valerie? I looked at the monitor. Whitmore stock was now down 22% in pre-market. The trend line was a steep, beautiful cliff. She'll call again. I said, probably from a burner phone after Julian fails to spin the narrative. She'll cry. She'll threaten. She might even apologize. But it won't matter. The algorithm doesn't care about tears. The market doesn't reward apologies. I opened a new terminal window and began typing a sequence of commands. I was initiating a secondary sweep, using a series of shell companies to quietly acquire the patents Whitmore had used as collateral for their now defaulted loans. When the bank sees the IP, I'd be the only buyer with the liquidity and the technical understanding to close the deal. I'd strip the valuable tech from the sinking ship and leave the brand to drown in its own debt. Get me a coffee. David, I said without looking up. Black, no sugar. I want to taste the bitterness. He left. I was alone with the machines. Outside, the sun was rising over Manhattan, painting the skyscrapers in shades of gold and shadow. On my screen, the red line representing Whitmore's decline kept dropping. My phone buzzed one last time. A text message from an unknown number, probably Valerie. Was any of it real? I stared at the words for a long second. Then I deleted the message. I didn't need to reply. The market was already answering for me. I went back to my code. The quantum computing startup needed a new liquidity model, and I had 500 million reasons to make sure it was perfect. Let her wonder about reality. I dealt in probabilities, and the probability of Whitmore Biotech surviving the next quarter without my capital was exactly 0. The dining room at the Modern was half empty at 8 a.m., which suited me. I was at a corner table overlooking the sculpture garden, though I hadn't looked at the art once. I was watching the Bloomberg terminal on my phone. Whitmore Biotech was down another 9% in early trading. The volume was thin. Nobody wanted to catch a falling knife. I heard her heels before I saw her. Control clicks on the polished concrete floor. Valerie sat down without asking, tossing her Hermes bag onto the empty chair, between us like a barrier. She looked tired. The makeup was there, but it couldn't hide the puffiness around her eyes. The armor was dented. You're not answering your phone, she said. Her voice was lower now, lacking the performative edge from a morning call. I'm returning emails from our Boston LPs. I said, not looking up. They're concerned about contagion risk. Apparently, having their capital parked in the same ecosystem as your failing company is bad for their quarterly reports. She flinched. It was subtle, but it was there. I'm not here to be humiliated further. Adrian, then why are you here? I finally met her gaze. To ask me to reinvest? To promise you'll never do it again? To tell me Julian was just a misunderstanding? I shook my head. The time for negotiations ended when you introduced him as my replacement. I made a mistake, she said, the words coming out like they physically hurt her to say. A branding error. I let the pressure of the IPO timeline get to me. Julian was supposed to be the face of the operational side. I needed a narrative. Narrative, I repeated, setting the phone down. That's your favorite word. You think the world runs on stories. It doesn't. It runs on inputs and outputs. You confuse a press release with a business model. A waiter appeared. I ordered black coffee. Valerie ordered an espresso, her hand shaking just enough for the cup to rattle against the saucer. You're being ideological, she said. Once we were alone again. This isn't about the money. It's about your ego. You're punishing me because your pride was hurt. I leaned forward, steepling my fingers. Let's talk about ideology. Then, your ideology is that perception is reality. My ideology is that math is reality. You spent 3 years optimizing for the appearance of success. The Forbes covers, the TED Talks, the curated Instagram posts with Julian. Meanwhile, I optimized for the probability of success. I built the algorithms that predicted your supply chain bottlenecks 6 months before you noticed them. I modeled the interest rate hikes that would cripple your debt servicing. I saw the cliff coming. Valerie, and you were too busy looking in the mirror to see it. I built that company from a garage. She shot back, her voice rising before she forced it down. I sourced the talent. I closed the deals. I You managed the brand. I corrected. The company you built was a vessel for my capital. The patents are encumbered by my liens. The talent is leaving because the options are underwater. You didn't build a moat, you built a stage. And now the audience has walked out. She stared at me, her jaw tight. So that's it? You're just going to let it all burn? It's not letting it burn. I said, it's acknowledging that the fire was already there. I'm just not paying for the water to put out anymore. In fact, I'm acquiring the water utility. I tapped a finger on the table. I bought the senior secured debt this morning through a SPV. Naturally, when the banks foreclose on your IP, I'll be the first lien holder. I'll own the underlying technology. You'll keep the brand, the name, the logo, the Instagram account. You can build all the narratives you want on an empty shell. Her face went white. You'd strip the company bare? That's predatory. It's efficient. I countered. The technology has value. Your management doesn't. By separating the two, I maximize the return for the actual stakeholders, the engineers, the researchers, the limited partners who trusted me to deploy capital rationally. You're confusing company with your ego. I'm correcting that confusion. She reached for her espresso, but didn't drink it. What about us? Was any of it real to you? I considered the question. It was the same one she'd texted me. I'd had 12 hours to formulate an answer that wasn't clouded by emotion. The 500 million was real. I said, the contracts were real. The algorithms I wrote to model our joint risk profile were real. The rest, the dinners, the vacations, the public appearances, was a derivative, a synthetic product designed to enhance your social capital. Derivatives have value only as long as the underlying asset is solvent. Our underlying asset was trust. You defaulted on that. Therefore, the derivative, our marriage, is worthless. She looked away, blinking rapidly. You're a machine. Adrian, you know that? I'm a rational actor in an irrational market. I said, picking up my phone as it vibrated. A notification from Aegis, senior debt acquisition complete. Control of collateral transferred. And the market just voted on your valuation. It's not looking good. I stood up, placing a $100 bill on the table. One more piece of advice. Valerie, stop trying to spin this. The more you talk, the more you remind people that you don't understand the numbers. Stay quiet. Let the bankruptcy proceedings speak for themselves. It's the only honest thing you have left. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. It was small, stripped of all artifice. Julian's gone, she said to the tablecloth. He cleaned out his desk this morning, said he couldn't work under this level of uncertainty. I didn't turn around. Of course he did. He was never an employee. He was a consultant on a project that just got canceled. Tell him to send an invoice. I'll make sure it's processed after the creditors are paid. I walked out. The morning air was crisp. I had a car waiting. As I slid into the back seat, David called. Adrian, you need to see this. Twitter is exploding. Some intern at a hedge fund in Connecticut just posted a thread titled The Anatomy of a $500 million Vanishing Act. It's breaking down the MAC clause, the debt acquisition, the whole play. It's making you look like a goddamn chess grandmaster. Send it to me. I said. I opened the thread on my phone. It was detailed, accurate, and already had 50,000 likes. The top reply was a screenshot of Valerie's last earnings call, with the caption, when your biggest investor realizes your husband is just a PR stunt and pulls the plug. What's the play now? David asked. Nothing. I said, we're done. Let the thread run. It reinforces a narrative, my narrative, that capital flows toward competence and away from chaos. It'll make the next fundraise for Q-Compute even easier. And Valerie? She's a case study now. David, a cautionary tale about the limits of branding. She'll spend the next year on podcasts talking about learning from failure. I'll spend the next year scaling a quantum computer. In 5 years, nobody will remember her name, but they'll be using the technology one salvaged from her wreckage. I ended the call. The car merged onto Fifth Avenue. I watched the people on the sidewalks, hurrying, talking. living lives that weren't governed by nine-figure liquidity crunches. They were the real world. Valerie had forgotten that. She'd lived in a world of her own making, and I'd just evicted her. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number, probably Julian, trying to salvage his reputation. I didn't check it. I opened my email and started drafting a memo to the team at Q Compute. Subject: Phase 2 deployment. The past was a sunk cost. The future was a probability distribution. And today, the odds were very much in my favor. The CNBC Chirin didn't even mention her name correctly. Whitmore Bio down 42% on week as liquidity crisis deepens. I was in the Aspect Capital trading floor, but I wasn't watching the main boards. I was in the glass wall conference room next to it, on a Zoom with Sarah Chun from Cooley and Mark Donovan from Goldman's pipe desk. Adrian, the vultures are circling, Mark said, leaning into his webcam. He looked like he hadn't slept since I pulled the plug. 3 different PE shops are sniffing around, but they all want the senior debt retired first. Since you hold it now, they're basically asking if you'll take a haircut to clear the path for a buyout. I muted my mic for a second to address Sarah. Tell them the debt isn't for sale at a discount. It's performing by accelerating the foreclosure. Anyway, if they want the patents, they buy them from me at par plus accrued interest. Or they can watch the company hit zero in court. Sarah nodded, typing on her tablet. I've drafted the response. Aspect Capital maintains its position as senior secured creditor and intends to enforce all rights under the loan agreements. Cold, but standard. Good, I said, unmuting. Mark, tell them the only discount I offer is on the liquidation value of the brand. They can have the Whitmore name for $1, but the IP stays with me. Mark sighed. You're really going scorched earth. Huh, Valerie's doing the rounds. She was on Squawk Box this morning. She's blaming aggressive short-term capital for undermining American innovation. I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Tell her to look at the filings. I'm not short. I was long until she lied about the cap table. And American innovation doesn't mean burning $500 million in R&D while hiring a PR firm to polish a chief of staff. My cell phone vibrated on the glass table. Unknown number. I ignored it. It vibrated again. And again. Persistent. I picked it up. Adrian. Valerie's voice was raw, stripped of the polished veneer she'd shown on TV. Turn on the TV. Look at what they're saying about me. I saw the clip. I said, keeping my voice level, you call me a liquidity terrorist. Creative. Did your crisis PR firm come up with that? Or was it Julian? Fuck you. She snapped, but there was no heat in it, just exhaustion. The lenders are calling. The board is meeting in an hour. They're going to oust me because of you. They're going to oust you because you presided over a 70% drawdown in equity value in 4 days and let your largest creditor walk. I corrected. I just provided the catalyst. You provided the volatility. I need you to intervene. She pleaded. Call the board. Tell them you're willing to negotiate. If you just say you'll backstop the credit line, the stock stabilizes. The lenders relax. I keep my job. Your job. I repeated. Is that what this is about? Not the company. Not the employees. Not the science. Just your title? You're still trying to manage the narrative while the building burns around you. It's my company. She shouted. It was a legal entity funded by my capital. I said, and now, it's a distressed asset being carved up by the courts. You're not the CEO of a biotech firm anymore. Valerie, you're a defendant in a potential shareholder lawsuit. Focus on that. I hung up. Mark was staring at me through the screen. Eyebrows raised. Rough conversation? He asked. Standard operating procedure. I replied, Sarah, file the motion for involuntary Chapter 7. I want the receivership appointed by Monday. The longer this drags out, the more the IP degrades in value. Done. Sarah said, though, Adrian, you should know there's a subpoena incoming from the SEC. They want to discuss the timing of your divestment relative to her public statements. I smiled. Perfect. That gives me discovery rights. I can demand every internal email, Every Slack message, every calendar invite from the last 6 months. I want to see how deep the Julian is my husband rabbit hole goes. If she perjured herself on national television about the state of the company's finances to inflate the stock, that's not my problem. It's her indictment. Mark whistled. You're not just burying her. Mun, you're planting the evidence for the tombstone. I'm ensuring the historical record is accurate. I said, the market rewards transparency. Valerie rewarded fiction. Now she gets audited. The conference room door opened. David walked in, holding his own phone. Adrian, you need to see this. Twitter again. That Wall Street Journal reporter, Miles Kovacs, just dropped a bombshell thread. I took the phone. The thread was already pinned at the top of finance Twitter. 1/The Fall of Whitmore Biotech isn't a story about a bad CEO. It's a story about the death of Founder Theater. 2/Sources confirm Valerie Whitmore introduced her costs as her husband to LPs to mask the fact that her real husband and primary backer had already checked out. 3/, but here's the kicker. Adrian Pierce didn't just walk. He used a sophisticated algorithmic divestment strategy that liquidated $500 million in under an hour without moving the pre-market needle. For Slash, this wasn't a tantrum. It was a surgical extraction. He then used the proceeds to buy the senior debt, effectively seizing control of the company's IP from the grave. 5/Valerie Whitmore played house. Adrian Pierce played chess. The board is meeting to fire her. The SEC is investigating her. And Pierce? He's already moved on to quantum computing. 6/ the lesson? Don't confuse a PR win with a business model. And never, ever lie to the guy who writes the algorithms. The replies were brutal. She thought he was a silent partner. He was a silent guillotine. Valerie, this is my husband. Mark it. No, this is your funeral. Pierce didn't divorce her. He delisted her. It's over for her. David said quietly, the brand is toxic, even if she lands somewhere else. Every LP will ask about the husband incident. She's done. She was done the moment she prioritized a photo op over a cap table. I said, handing the phone back. Now, she's just a data point in a case study on moral hazard. My desk phone rang. Internal line. I picked it up. Adrian, it's Lisa in reception. Julian Voss is here. He says he needs to see you. He looks disheveled. I paused. This was unexpected. I'd assumed Julian would vanish into the Hamptons or mid-tier consulting gig. Send him up. I said, and tell security to wait outside the elevator bank. 2 minutes later, the doors opened. Julian stepped out. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in jeans and a wrinkled button-down. His hair was messy. He looked like a man who'd spent the last 48 hours in a dive bar, which, knowing him, was entirely possible. He walked into the conference room without waiting for an invitation. Mark and Sarah were still on the Zoom, staring at him. Get out, Julian said, pointing at my screen. I need to talk to him alone. The meeting is over, I said to Mark and Sarah. They nodded and disconnected. I gestured to the chair opposite me. Sit. Julian sat. He ran a hand through his hair. She's finished, he said. It wasn't a question. The board just voted her out. They're appointing a receiver. The SEC is at her apartment. I am aware. I said, why are you here? Julian? Looking for a reference? I'm afraid the only thing I can verify is your skill at standing next to people and smiling. He ignored the jab. I know things, he said, leaning forward, about the company, about the deals she was cutting under the table, the side letters to the LPs, the inflated revenue recognition in the last quarter. If I give you everything, emails, documents, the whole playbook, will you protect me? I stared at him. He was offering to rat out the woman who just handed him a crown. However fake, it was pathetic. It was also potentially useful. Protect you from what? I asked. From her, he said. From the lawsuits. From the criminal investigation. She's going to try to pin this all on me. Say I forced her to lie. Say I manipulated numbers. I need you to tell them. Tell them I was just following orders. That I didn't know. I leaned back, considering. You didn't know? You stood in front of a room of institutional investors and allowed her to introduce you as her husband. You accepted the title. You benefited from the fraud. Now you want immunity because the roof caved in? I want to survive, he hissed. You've got yours. You pulled your money out. You're sitting on a mountain of cash while she's facing the consequences of her choices. I finished. And you're facing the consequences of enabling them. You're not a victim. Julian, you're a co-conspirator. The only difference is she was the architect, and you were the decorative gargoyle. I stood up. Here's what's going to happen. You will walk out of this building. You're going to hire a very good criminal defense attorney, not the white shoe firm Valerie uses. They'll drop her the second the indictment drops. You're going to tell them everything. And when the SEC or the U.S. Attorney's office calls me, I'll confirm that you were, indeed, present for the fraudulent introduction. Beyond that, your survival is your own problem. You're a monster. Julian whispered. I'm a fiduciary. I corrected. My responsibility is to my investors and the integrity of the market. You and Valerie forgot that the market is a mechanism for price discovery, not a stage for your vanity projects. Now, get out. Security is waiting. I pressed a button on the intercom. Lisa, send security to escort Mr. Voss from the premises. Julian stood, his face a mask of hatred and fear. He didn't say another word. He just turned and walked out, flanked by 2 guards in dark suits. I sat back down. David was standing in the doorway. That was intense. It was predictable. I said, I opened my email and started typing a memo to the Aspect Capital compliance officer. Note to file. Julian Voss offered material non-public information regarding Whitmore Biotech's accounting practices in exchange for preferential treatment. I declined. Inform legal counsel. We'll provide full cooperation with any regulatory inquiry. But we volunteer nothing. We're clean. I hit send. Then I opened the Aegis dashboard. The algorithms were humming. The Q-Compute investment was already up 2% on the news of the Whitmore collapse. Investors were rotating out of speculative biotech and into hard tech with proven leadership. The market had spoken. Its verdict was clear. Valerie Whitmore was a bankruptcy. Julian Voss was a footnote. And I was the quiet force that ensured the math remained balanced. I looked at the TV in the corner of the room. CNBC was now showing a split screen, a photo of Valerie looking defiant, and a chart of her stock in freefall. The anchor was saying, a stunning reversal for a CEO once hailed as a future of biotech. The question now isn't if Whitmore Biotech survives, but who goes to jail. I muted the TV. The noise was irrelevant. The numbers were everything. And for the first time in 3 years, the numbers aligned perfectly with my reality. 3 years. 18 months since the last Whitmore creditor meeting. 9 months since the final IP auction, where my SBV picked up the core CRISPR patents for 11 cents on the dollar. I was in a Stanford lecture hall, not teaching, but guest speaking for a graduate seminar on market microstructure. The room was packed. They weren't here for the theory. They were here for the ghost of Whitmore Biotech. I clicked to the last slide. It wasn't a formula. It was a simple equation on a stark white background. Freedom equals optionality, attachment, a kid in the front row, likely a CS major with a minor in entrepreneurial delusions, raised his hand. Mr. Pierce, is that your personal philosophy, or is it a trading algorithm? A few people laughed. I didn't. It's both. I said, optionality is the ability to pivot when new information invalidates your priors. Attachment is the emotional or contractual bias that prevents you from pivoting. In trading, attachment to a losing position is called bag holding. In marriage, attachment to a partner who publicly disowns your contribution is called being a mark. I chose optionality. Another hand, a girl this time, sharp eyes, no notebook, typing on a ThinkPad. You've been called ruthless. That you destroyed Valerie Whitmore, not just professionally, but personally. Do you ever feel anything about what happened? I looked at the clock on the podium. 4:52 p.m. Feelings are latency in a high-frequency trading model. They delay execution. I felt the need to protect my investors' capital. I felt the need to correct a mispriced risk. I felt the need to ensure that the technology one funded didn't vanish into a PR black hole. Those are productive feelings. Regret, remorse, anger, those are unproductive. They're taxes on clarity. I paid the tax. I claimed the loss. And I moved the capital to a higher yielding asset class. Namely, myself. I stepped away from the podium. Valerie Whitmore isn't a person to me anymore. She's a case study. You can find it on page 14 of your syllabus. The Whitmore Collapse, Agency Costs, and the Limits of Founder Narrative. Read it. The midterm will cover the Mac Clause litigation. I dismissed the class. Most of them stayed, hoping for a selfie or a quote. I walked out the side exit, where a car was waiting. My phone buzzed. A Google alert. Former Whitmore CEO Valerie Whitmore joins Web Summit as entrepreneur in residence. I skimmed the press release. It was laughable. She was mentoring early-stage startups in Lisbon. The photo showed her at a WeWork-style hot desk, smiling like she hadn't just been forcibly removed from her own company by a federal judge. David called as I slid into the car. Did you see the Web Summit news? Valerie's back on the circuit, trying to spin the collapse as a growth experience. Irrelevant. I said, is she raising a fund? No. Is she joining a public board? No. Is she anywhere near a 9-figure PL? Absolutely not. She's a keynote speaker at a conference sponsored by Red Bull and LinkedIn. She's monetizing her failure. Let her. It pays about 90% less than being a CEO. Fair point. David said, but there's more. Julian Voss just surfaced. He's in Austin. Started a consultancy called Voss Strategies. Tagline, navigating the intersection of brand and capital. I actually laughed. He's selling the exact snake oil that poisoned Whitmore. Does he have any clients? None listed. Just a Medium blog where he talks about the importance of perceived value. Sounds like he's still bitter. There's a Reddit thread in our /Wall Street Bets mocking his website. Top comment. His only strategy is being introduced as someone's husband. Pathetic, I said, but predictable. He was always a derivative of Valerie's ego. Without the underlying asset, he's just a worthless option. Let him blog. It's free entertainment for the retail traders. I hung up. The car was heading toward Palo Alto. I had a dinner with the Q-Compute team. They just hit a breakthrough on qubit coherence times. Real science, not a photo op in sight. Later that evening, over a late dinner at a place that didn't require reservations or ties, I was talking with Dr. Eris Thorne, the lead physicist. She was brilliant, focused, and had zero interest in my net worth. She cared about gate fidelities and error correction. You seem settled, she said, pushing a half-eaten salad around her plate. Most people in your position would be on a yacht in St. Bart's, not discussing Joseph's injunctions over a lukewarm steak. Yachts depreciate. I said, knowledge compounds. Besides, I tried the settled life once. It required me to be silent while my name was erased from my own balance sheet. This, I gestured to the napkin between us, covered in her equations. This is quieter and more honest. She smiled, a rare, genuine expression. Isn't it lonely? Running algorithms instead of relationships? I looked at her. For a second, I considered lying. Then I remembered the equation. Loneliness is the tax on clarity. I repeated. I pay it gladly. Relationships are multivariate problems with too many unknown variables. Code is deterministic. If X happens, Y follows. With people, especially people like my ex-wife, X happens and they claim Y never existed. I prefer systems I can debug. Ever miss it? Though, she asked, the partnership, not the wife, but the idea of building something with someone? I thought about it, not about Valerie, about the concept. I miss the efficiency. I admitted, two aligned intelligences can solve for complexity faster than one, but alignment requires honesty. She offered performance. I required data. The mismatch was fatal. I'm married to the work now, and she never lies. The error bars are clearly marked. Dr. Thorne nodded, understanding. The freedom equation. It makes sense. You traded the illusion of partnership for the reality of control. Control is an illusion, too. I said, signaling for the check. But it's a more mathematically rigorous one. I control my inputs. I manage my risk. I diversify my attachments. Everything else is noise. As I left the restaurant, I passed a newsstand. A tabloid headline screamed, Valerie Whitmore, I'd do it all again. I didn't buy the magazine. I didn't need to. I knew the arc. She'd spend the next decade giving cautionary tale talks, blaming short-termism and market cruelty. She'd never admit the truth, that she'd chosen a pretty lie over a profitable reality. Julian would fade into the background of tech conferences, a punchline in someone's slide deck about due diligence. And me? I'd be here, in the quiet, building things that mattered, things that could be measured, tested, and improved, not because a camera was on me, but because the math demanded it. I got back in the car. The driver asked if I wanted to go home. I told him to circle the block. I wanted to think, not about the past, about the next allocation, the next equation. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number, probably a journalist, or maybe Valerie, using a burner phone from a Lisbon co-working space. I didn't check it. I opened my email and started a draft to the Aspect Capital Investment Committee. Subject, reallocation update, Q3. The Whitmore divestment yielded a 14% internal rate of return upon recovery of senior debt. Despite the equity wipeout, the subsequent acquisition of IP has been integrated into our life sciences vertical, now profitable. Key takeaway, narrative-driven valuations are mean reverting. Capital deployed toward technical moats outperforms in all market regimes. Recommendation, increase allocation to quantum error correction by $200 million. Reduce exposure to consumer-facing AI hype cycles. Attachment, updated freedom equation white paper. I hit send. The car kept moving. The city lights blurred past. I wasn't running anymore. I was just free. Free from the performance. Free from the expectation. Free from the need to be seen. I looked out the window and spoke to the empty car. The closest thing I had to a confessional. She introduced him as my replacement. I introduced myself to the truth. Best trade I ever made. The car turned onto University Avenue. The future was a probability distribution, and for the first time in my life, I held all the variables.